Hey everyone, what's going on? It's 2 minutes to review. It's Matt.
And it's Zack.
Longest album review in under 2 minutes wins. Look, there's no reason to mince words on this one. You clicked the picture, you saw the band, you know who it is. The latest from the Rolling Stones in Hackney Diamonds.
Listen, we know we throw around big words and names whenever we're talking about certain bands, but this literally is the biggest, most well-known rock band in the world. Maybe only second to the Beatles. It's the Rolling frickin' Stones. Just a new album alone from the Rolling Stones would be a huge deal. But the fact that this is their first album of original music in 18 years, and the fact that it's their first album since the passing of the beloved Charlie Watts, and it actually features his last recordings that we are aware of. His replacement, Steve Jordan, plays drums on most of the album, but it features a few tracks with Charlie on it, as well as the return of Bill Wyman on one track. Forget even that alone being pretty awesome. You also got guest appearances from Lady Gaga. You got guest appearance from Elton John, from Stevie Wonder, and what's that? Paul McCartney. That's right, a Beatle actually appears on a Rolling Stone album. What a time to be alive.
Like the song says, come together.
There you go. Well, that's the Beatles, but yeah. That makes
right
sense.
now.
You can't always get what you want, but in this case, fans around the world got what they wanted. Paul McCartney and the Rolling Stones.
That's not how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the original take. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you might just find Paul McCartney's available for a bass solo. Are we going to get sued? Is that considered copyright if I just sang that poorly? I mean,
no.
It's poor enough that like it could be considered a parody. I think we're covered by the Weird Al rule.
I think we're good.
Okay. Well, enough beating around the bush. Let's just jump right into it like Jumpin' Jack Flash and get to our reviews of the new Rolling Stones album, Hackney Diamonds. Matt, would you be shocked if I told you that this little man wants to go first?
I suppose you can go first. No, it doesn't surprise me. And I'm sure if you've listened to enough of these, I never go first.
And if you haven't, go to our link in our bio page and listen to our episodes on any streaming platform.
3, 2, 1, go.
So this may or may not be considered an insult, depending on where you fall in Rolling Stone fandom. But if you told me that this album were basically leftovers from the album Tattoo You, released in 1981, I wouldn't be so surprised. I mean that as a compliment because, frankly, songs like the first single, Angry, sound exactly like what you'd expect a Rolling Stones song to sound like. Kind of in the same way that if you had to pinpoint, and this is going to ruffle feathers, but what would you envision Rolling Stones to sound like? Start Me Up, the guitar riff is probably the closest to this is what the Stones sound like. And that is a compliment in that really, there's no reason the Stones should sound as good as they do here. The songs like Get Close, Bite My Head Off, and Mess It Up. I mean, there's a bite to those guitar riffs that Ronnie and Keith do that just really remind you, oh yeah, the Stones really are freaking awesome. And yeah, there's definitely some moments, some of the slower songs, like Depending on You, or even, the more bluesy rock song Live by the Sword, where it gets a little like, all right, where are we going here? For the most part, it's refreshing to hear how engaged the band sound, considering that we got Mick Jagger, who's 80 years old, Keith almost turning 80 years old, and Ronnie in his late 70s. I mean, this band, I would never guess that this is a band that could basically be my great-grandfather at this point. I mean, I'm grandfather. I don't want to make me sound that young, but there is a fire on this record, and the production is so clean, and songs are just that catchy. I mean, especially, I was not prepared for Mess It Up to have such a catchy hook in the chorus. I mean, this is going to sound like a terrible pun, but if you are a huge fan of the Rolling Stones, or even just a casual fan of the Rolling Stones who thinks they know what the Stones sound like, this album will leave you satisfied.
And out of 5 stars, what would you give it?
Out of 5 tongue and lips logos, I'm going to give this a 3. I could maybe even lend it towards 3.5. It's a very, very good album. Like, I honestly am very impressed with how good this is. Will this still be on my playlists in years to come? I'm not sure. there's definitely some moments I'm like, all right, look, this is okay. But I will say, even the first single, Angry, I'm like, wow, this actually sounds way better than I should. And I also hate to say this, but I do have to admit that Andrew Watt, who produced this album, if you've listened to our past episodes, we've been very critical of some of his other albums that he's produced, namely the stuff he's done with Ozzy Osbourne. I think this album proves that maybe while he might not be a great producer for a metal album like the stuff that Ozzy would produce, the Rolling Stones is right up his alley. Him and Don Was, they created a really good, clean sounding album. And I have a hard time believing that any Stones fan will not get satisfaction from listening to this album.
No,
we can't. We don't have the rights to that. We're gonna get sued. We're gonna get sued. I already lost a lot of money for us by singing. You can't always get what you want. So be careful, Matt. Please. I have kids.
I'll try. No guarantees.
Anyway, Matt, are you ready to give your 2 cents in under 2 minutes?
I suppose I am.
All right, I'm going to count you down, fool. 3, 2, 1, go.
If this is the last album that we ever get from the Rolling Stones, this is a fitting end to a 60-year-long career. And it's hard to believe it's been that long because this album sounds completely inspired and it drips with the Stones swagger and lyrics that are clearly from someone who's been around and lived, but is still young at heart, which makes this album completely and widely relatable to a larger audience. So if you've never heard of the Rolling Stones before going into this, I think they'll actually make you a fan on this album because both Mick and Keith sound incredible on the vocals, not just for their age, but just in general. And the songs on the album, some of them are immediate classics to their catalog, including Get Close, Depending on You, which for me has like this Zeppelin-esque beauty about it. Whole Wide World, the chorus and the solo on that album might be my favorite on the entire album. There's just something about the progression that they use throughout the chorus. It's incredible. And the solo, it's just great what Keith actually does on the solo on there. Mess It Up. Somehow they managed to fit a little bit of disco flair on here for the Stones, and it actually kind of works. I hate to say it. And then they've got like slower Delta bluesy style type songs like Dreamy Skies, which if you think kind of like a Jack White type vibe, that's what you're going to get off of it. And it's really great. And then if you're looking for the Keith Richards vocal track, well, Tell Me Straight. And that's another just great, dark, bluesy ballad. And there are bands that are out there right now. I'm going to say this, and I 100% mean this. There are bands that are 30 to 40 years younger, and even younger than the Stones, that wish they could have done something like this and had an album that was produced this well. Now, there are some negatives, but it's really kind of just nitpicky. It really is, what do you like? Like, I think the first single, Angry, had too much reverb, and it sounded like knocked together. Okay, but that's really just, my take. I don't necessarily think everybody's going to hate it. Do you like slower bluesy songs? If you don't, you're not going to like a few of those songs. But for what this album is, from one of the biggest bands of all time, this is a fitting end to a career, if that's what this is.
All right, time's locked in. Out of 5 lips and tongue logos, what do you give this album?
I'm going to say this comment. In the eternal question of Beatles and Stones, I've always picked Beatles.
Mm-hmm. Same.
I've never been the biggest fan of the Stones. That being said, this is 5.
Whoa!
It is. It's 5 stars.
Listen, by the way, I should say, I know I gave it 3 stars in my review. I honestly am hovering over the 3.5, maybe even 4. The nitpicky moments for me is what kind of made me go 3. But whoa, 5. Yeah. 5 stars from you.
They won me over because I found myself listening to this and really being like, do I really not like the Stones as much as I think I don't like the Stones? Because this is really good. The guest appearances They did nothing for me. I listened to each one of these songs not knowing that there were guest appearances and enjoying the hell out of them.
You hit it on the nail. Like the fact that they sound so inspired. I kind of wrote them off when it came to new music with The Bigger Bang, which they released 18 years ago, because that sounded so uninspired. This album, they must have been itching to like actually play new music again, because they sound like they actually want to be there, which for
Not
a
only
band like the
be
Stones,
there,
who like it's like they've had hit records where they were barely in the same room together. So the fact that they sound so into it
it's,
is awesome.
how do I say this? And I don't want to come off like an asshole. For them being as old as they are, they could just say, whatever. We're going to just do something and call it the Stones.
You know what? For
This,
them being as famous as they are, not even age, the fact that they don't need to do a new album. They could tour just on a greatest hits on an 18th greatest hits compilation. They don't need to give us new music. And the fact that they sound as energized as they do, either Andrew Wild is that much of a good producer, or they really are just that amazing.
there is a lot on this album to enjoy. And to hear the lyrics that Mick Jagger has come up with, or whoever wrote the song, what they came up with, it really feels like they're trying to tell a proper story about how they feel. Like, I can't remember the exact lyrics, but I know that there's a song that's in like the early part of the album where they talk about you're too young to do this and you're too old to do that, and it just fits the Stones so perfectly, because if you look at Mick Jagger and you watch the way he acts at 80 years old, this man isn't ready to give up. This man isn't ready to die. This man isn't, ready to stop living. And the lyrics reflect that. And it's such a great way to depict where they are at in their lives. And throughout the album, some of the different styles that they've chosen are a direct reflection of things that they've done. And it still sounds fresh and good and something you want to listen to, and not something you picked up and you're forced to kind of listen to because, well, it's the Stones. I got to kind of listen to this. This album will make you completely throw any of those preconceived notions out the window that you're just picking up a new CD from a band that's pretty much done.
And to kind of continue off that, I think for me, what also shocked me was how rocking it sounds. I know it sounds kind of silly because, of course, it's the Rolling Stones and they're great, one of the greatest rock and roll bands. But just knowing, with their age and just, them trying to be more in the like they always wear their Delta blues and R&B on their sleeves. And for them to produce such a guitar-driven album. I mean, Keith and Ronnie, their guitar work on this album for me is what made me kind of love it. Like, I forgot how great they are. Like, you hear that, like, the Stones are just, their name is everywhere, that you kind of forget. And like, no, Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood are two of the greatest guitarists in rock and roll, and their performances are amazing on this album. Forget even age again, like, especially with Keith Richards being like always known as like kind of the grumpy old guy lately. For him to sound so excited to pick up his instrument and to play with a purpose, it's awe-inspiring. And I think we also need to talk a little bit. I know I hyped it up a little bit in the beginning, but the fact that we have a kick-ass rock song featuring Rolling Stones and Paul McCartney, who delivers a fuzztastic bass solo in the middle of an already fuzztastic rock song, bite my head off. I did not realize how much I needed to hear Paul McCartney and the Stones do a kick-ass rock song until I heard that. I mean, because if you think about it, every time Paul McCartney's been collaborating with someone, it's, oh my God, Sir Paul McCartney's in the studio. But if there's ever an artist who's on the same level of fame and as Paul McCartney, and if there's ever someone who can go, hey, Paul, either show up at 10 o'clock or don't show up at all, it's Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. Even Ringo can't get away with saying that crap to Paul anymore. So to just being able to envision them in the studio together is kind of mind-blowing. And I can actually even envision them playing together while listening to this song, which is another testament to the great production on this.
There's not much more that I can say about this. It just sounds like people that want to be playing music, right? One of the things, and I'm going to throw this name out here, and we do this a lot, but on the last Metallica album, the only person that I really felt inspiring throughout the whole album was James Hetfield's vocal performance. And if you've listened to the latest Metallica album, it's not the greatest. And I'm not afraid to say it. I was prepared
for the record, I very much differ from Matt's opinion on that album, but listen to our past episode of 2 Minutes to Review on Metallica's last album, 72 Seasons, to find out why, on any streaming platform you can think of.
I really thought that coming into this, it was going to be more of the same. Like Mick was going to show up and Mick was going to sound good, or Keith was going to sound good and Mick was going to be just whatever. But hell, you can feel like Mick just singing his heart out, dancing in the studio, Keith ripping up the guitar. Most people wish they could sound half this good. And I'll say it again. There's no reason why this shouldn't be one of the must listen to albums of this year, and I'd say even in top contention for album of the year of this year.
Well, spoiler alert from our end of the year episode, I think. But I mean, while I disagree about the Metallica comments, I see where you're going with it, and I completely agree in that. I figured, all right, there might be some good moments on here, but man, I did not expect them to actually sound like they wanted to be there. And again, I would argue that if you really need to help define what Rolling Stones sound like, this is actually a great starter album, as you mentioned before.
Absolutely.
But you know what? None of that matters, Matt. You know it. I know it. What really matters is who gave the longest review in under 2 minutes. Was it you? Was it me? Did we both suck and lose? Matt, what was my time down it?
Well, Zach, your time was 2 minutes and 5 seconds.
Oof. Well, Matt, guess what? Your time was 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You went over slightly more. Luckily for you, we both get disqualified, so we can both hang our heads in shame and just enjoy the fact that we got to listen to a new Rolling Stones album.
And it'd be good.
Well, yeah, I think first shocker is, wow, it's 2023 and the Rolling Stones are still releasing music. And two, wow, it's 2023. And this, not even that they released a good album, but they released probably their best album in over 2 decades. I would make that argument.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that.
Actually, maybe even 3. Sorry.
Sorry. This is what people need to realize and learn. There's a reason why people hold bands like the Rolling Stones in such high regard, and this album is proof of it.
So go listen to it yourself. After you listen to it, come back and tell us, are Matt and I crazy? Were we listening to the same album as you? Or do you completely agree with us in that this is probably the Rolling Stones' best album in many, 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 many times 10 years? Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Actually, I'm sorry, not Twitter anymore. X, whatever the heck that is. Threads, if that's still a thing by the time you listen to this. TikTok, at Epic Footnote. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you get a lot more episodes like this, as well as actually our past interview with Corey Glover of Living Colour, where he went into great detail about both what it was like to collaborate with Mick Jagger in the studio on Living Colour's first album, as well as actually tour the Rolling Stones. I highly recommend you listen to that if you haven't had a chance to yet. And a massive thank you to Lucky 13 Beard Co.
Log on to lucky13beardco.com. And with the holiday season fastly approaching, if you know a guy, yeah, it's true, with that special guy in your life or just somebody who wants to smell really good and moisturize their skin, the Lucky 13 is probably one of your best options out there, if not the best option out there, to pick up a great, unique smelling beard balm and oil. May I suggest ours that we have with them? It is called the Lemmy. It smells of bourbon, tobacco, cola, and leather. It is honestly the best smelling beard oil I've ever smelled, and I've tried a ton of them myself. And we're going to give you 10% off of your entire order. So whatever you want, throw it in your cart. Use the code EFP10 at checkout. Get 10% off of your entire order. Lucky13, the number beardco.com. Use that code EFP10 at checkout.
And you know what? Fine. If we're talking about buying gifts for the holidays, you know what would also make a great stocking stuffing? Or I'm Jewish. I actually don't really know what is it?
Stocking stuffer.
Stocking stuffer?
Yeah.
Need a gift? Go to any link in our bio page, our link tree, where you'll find a link to our merch site. We've got awesome Epic Footnote hats, coffee mugs, hoodies, hats, shirts. You name it, we probably have it in there. It's a great way to support us so we can keep making episodes like this, but also just a way to let your friends know, hey, I listened to Matt and Zack review Rolling Stones and other albums like that. You should listen to them too. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you join us for another episode real soon.
See ya.